Well, welcome to the Privacy Stack, who sees what, when, and with whose consent. I'll be your moderator. My name is Duff. I'm a student researcher at Lehigh University. I'm a big privacy advocate. I went to the Roman Storm trials this summer in New York, done a bunch of privacy hackathons, and the focus of my research at school right now is privacy and compliance. And I'll let my panelists introduce themselves. We'll start with Furkan.
Yeah, sure. It's Furkan. I'm from Turkey. I work at Inco as a researcher. I'm coming from mathematics background, and as we've been also doing a research paper with predicate for last couple of months, it's pretty relevant for me, and I'm happy to be here to talk about privacy and compliance.
Is this working? Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. I'm Elia Anzuoni. I work at ChainSecurity as a smart contract auditor. My background is in computer security and cryptography, and in my own free time, I maintain an open source project on plausible deniability. That's why I'm particularly interested personally in this panel.
Hi all, I'm Kostas. I'm the CTO at Veridise. So my background is mainly in this branch of academia called formal methods, where we develop tools that understand code, and they can be used to find bugs or verify that your code is correct. So at Veridise, we do a lot of auditing. We have audited a lot of different things, from DeFi protocols to ZK protocols, privacy preserving pools, all of these type of things. And we also develop security tools, automated security tools based on the theory of formal methods, which most of our teams have studied, that help developers and security analysts find bugs more efficiently and also prove that their circuits or their systems are correct.
Awesome, sweet. So my first question was kind of getting at the essence of the panel, I believe, which is you've probably seen so many homepages and Twitter bios that propose some type of privacy. They say, oh, private transaction system, private rollup, private stablecoins, something like that. But then when you get into the technicals, you realize that some aspects are actually not private. Like, for example, maybe the linking between the sender and the receiver is private, but the amount isn't, or maybe the amount is private, but you can see the link. Maybe there's private state. So I was going to have each of you guys give like an example of something in that spectrum, some privacy technique. It could be a protocol that's live, an idea, an EIP, or just like a cryptographic approach to things.
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, I think it's a great point. Most people are not aware of privacy is not a standalone and well-defined thing. Actually, it's a sort of spectrum, and there is something we call anonymity. There is something we call confidentiality. There is even something called pseudonymity, which is not super relevant maybe, but like anonymity and confidentiality would be the main two phases. Where in anonymity, like sender and recipient are private, where the amounts, maybe the asset type are public. But in the confidentiality, like the sender and recipient are public, where the amount being sent is private, which I do think like these two different types are useful in different setups. So yeah, there is no best, I think, but they're relevant in different settings. So I think it's a really good opportunity to tell this difference.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like most of the things I see are anonymity then under that definition, like Tornado Cash, classic example where unlinks the sender receiver, but you see the amount. I guess, what do you think, this is open for all of you guys, but what do you think will be more useful going forward? Like hiding the link between transactions or hiding the amounts? Because I can see from one hand, there's like an auditability argument where you can see who gets sent to and from, but then on the other hand, is that enough privacy for people?
Well, I mean, I think there are systems. I mean, depends what do you mean by link and amount, but I think there are systems that once you are within the pool, right, everything is private, right? We have seen presentation from Railgun. They're like, Panther protocol is like another protocol we have worked with. That like, the leaky part comes like, a little bit like later, but then like, you have like a kind of like a time frame where like, everything is private, like, you don't know, who's interacting with whom. I mean, these protocols or some of these protocols provide kind of like auditing capabilities for like, regulatory reasons to kind of like, go and check who has interacted with whom. But like I feel we need to go towards somewhere like, as one of the previous like speakers talked, somewhere like, everything stays private more or less forever, right? Because like, that's what people are used to from a financial system, right? Like, nobody can see what I have, transaction I've done in my bank account, right? So but then like, there again we'll have to kind of like have some kind of like way of like, revealing things like, for like, regulatory reasons, and making sure that like, we can catch the bad guys at least.
Yeah. That's a hot topic. I mean, I think what you're kind of alluding to is like, okay, we'll get into the compliance aspect of revealing certain information in a second, but welcome. Can we have an introduction?
Hi, my name is Lucian. I lead integrations at Boundless. And we are a ZK proving network that was started by Risk Zero. So ZKVMs and the ability to build on-chain private and compliant applications have never been easier, since you could write arbitrary Rust code that you could deploy on any network.
Awesome. Yeah, we're kind of just having like a unstructured discussion of the different like levels of privacy. Elia, earlier you mentioned plausible deniability, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there's 1,000,000,001 flavors of that,
Mhm.
depending on your specific framework. In the network framework, what you're looking at is like the lowest you can get is Tor. The lowest you can get is Tor, because that doesn't hide the fact that you're even connecting somewhere.
Mhm.
So if somebody observes you, then they can tell that at least you're trying to connect to Tor. The highest you can get is mixednet, where the amount of noise traffic is devised such that somebody can't even tell who is even sending anything. And with the project I'm personally working on, is like works on plausible deniability at the local storage level. At that point, you're looking at something completely different definition-wise, because you want to hide. I mean, more or less, it's the same. You want to hide the very fact that you have anything.
Mhm.
And in blockchains, in blockchains again, you want to hide the very fact that you're even transacting.
Which is like a very powerful level of privacy, like being able to hide the fact that you interacted with a privacy protocol in the first place. Yeah.
Exactly. And something like this can be achieved by Zcash. I mean, it is more or less a solved problem if you don't want smart contracts.
Mhm.
If you just want value transfer, then you can achieve it. But then the next wave is bringing the same level of privacy to like programmable blockchains, and that's a whole different story. And that's where we're seeing all the innovation currently.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the big examples of that is ZK systems, right? Like we're seeing a current like boom of ZK systems to allow for programmable privacy. And I mean, Lucian, you work for a ZKVM there, right? Are you seeing any adoption of using ZKVMs for privacy applications, or more for the benefit of succinct verifiability?
So ZKVMs have an overhead compared to application-specific ZK solutions. That makes a big difference when you push for client-side proving. So client-side proving is when you have the end user generate a zero-knowledge proof that is then submitted on-chain. A lot of people think about on-chain ZK privacy as like end-user privacy. So when you build a transaction in a shielded pool in Zcash, for example, you're generating it on device. That's not currently the optimal design space for ZKVMs, but the Zcash team did actually do some pretty important research recently. I think they published it last week on a design pattern for scaling where they start part of the computation on the client side, but the recursive, like larger part of the computation is offloaded to, I think they called them oblivious provers. And that design pattern works perfectly for prover networks as well. I think that as we mature these systems, we'll start thinking about splitting up the full verification of like first starting it client side and then offloading it to a larger prover network like Boundless. This is a brand new design pattern. And I honestly think that the paper that was published last week was kind of like the first formal analysis of the security properties of systems like this. But this is also how Boundless views on-chain client-side privacy as well. We don't really support the idea that if you run a ZKP on like a big cloud data center and with a TE attestation that it's actually private. That's not the kind of privacy I'm here for. So yeah, we have a bit more research to do and it's not our strongest suit, but since we're talking about like what kind of privacy, I think it's important to note that if you run proofs yourself or if you host your own GPU clusters, then anything you post on chain that's generated after those proofs is private. So you could have design patterns in which it's not like pushed all the way to the client, but you have intra-organizational privacy where everything on chain is private, but the GPU clusters actually have like full access to the inputs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know about that paper actually. So you can effectively use the benefit of quickly generating zero knowledge proof using a network, but without sacrificing your private inputs to that network. It sounds kind of similar to like multi-party computation, but I guess I don't know
think
the trade-offs.
The good analogy for it is in ZKVMs we all have recursion, and that allows except jolts, but they're different. So in ZKVMs, you have recursion and you start the computation client side enough to be able to obfuscate the initial inputs. And then you can offload the rest of it. The benefits of ZKVMs, which is why we kind of had this huge renaissance of ZK, is there's no compute limits anymore to the size of ZKPs. And the dev velocity of being able to run arbitrary Rust code and turn it into a ZKP, we built the first like stage 0 ZKVM in 2 weeks. We took Reth, we basically ran it in our ZKVM after some patches, and we had a full ZKVM.
Yeah, no, ZK is fantastic innovation. Seems kind of like magic. But I want to ask Furkan, Kostas, sorry, actually, is it actually magic? Like, I feel like you have a better idea of kind of the dirty internal details. How much do you trust all these ZK applications coming out?
Oh, I mean, like, it's like the ZKVM aspect of it, I think, is kind of like the cherry on the top that makes all of the things like magical. We have worked like a lot of with Risk Zero and Boundless. And, you know, when you kind of like, you know, go over the security process of checking, you know, low-level circuits, whether like, you know, the application correctly implements the RISC-V semantics in a whatever DSL the team is using. There is like, you know, very complex, very heavy math. Like, you know, you need to be like very careful. Things can go wrong. You can have like missing constraints that can like, you know, jeopardize the whole application. But when you raise kind of like the level of abstraction and you stop kind of like, you know, building applications directly on, you know, ZK circuits and you build it on Rust, then applications are way more easy to review and audit and make sure that they are secure. you have to kind of like, adapt like a little bit because you have to essentially learn a new programming paradigm. I mean, it's still Rust, but like, you need to kind of like know how to commit the inputs to the journal and like, all of these things. But, once you kind of like familiarize yourself on how to properly secure your application and what needs to go to the journal, so, attackers cannot kind of like exploit things about like what you're essentially proving, things become way more like streamlined, and it's way easier to build whatever you want because um, we have seen applications like that are privacy preserving applications built on top of circuits, and these are way harder to review and make sure that they're secure compared to like reading a Rust program, right?
That's actually interesting. I didn't realize, yeah, the implications of verification that comes with like using a ZKVM in a different language. Okay, so I think I'm going to move to maybe the second part, which is like the introduction of compliance to revealing some aspects of information. So we kind of see the two major compliance strategies as being like some form of retroactive de-anonymization with like view keys or revealing some user information, or kind of a more proactive proof-based approach where you have to submit some proof of compliance before interacting with an application. I'll start with you this time too. I guess you probably have some thoughts on these two.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, the viewing key based solutions are quite straightforward to understand, but like the proactive compliance methods may not be that straightforward. And like there are several solutions. I guess the main idea is proof of inclusion / exclusion. For instance, in proof of innocence, you simply prove that you simply exclude yourself from a set of some wallets where they are related to some illicit funds. But let's say in association set providers within the Oxbow system, you simply prove that you are actually a member of a set of innocent wallets. But the idea is to prove that you're a either set of a set or a member of a set or not a member of a set. But this is not only alternative, obviously, out there. Like for instance, as far as I know, Labyrinth will be using a decentralized threshold network of guardians to decrypt a transaction when let's say third-party regulators can prove that any particular address is actually has illicit funds.
What is a decentralized threshold network?
So they call it network of guardians. Let's say there are 100 guardian nodes, and there is a threshold decryption protocol under hood, meaning let's say the threshold is 66%. If the 66% of the guardians agree on the fact that any particular account has some illicit funds, then 66% of the guardians actually sufficient to decrypt any particular transaction to any revoker, meaning any regulator in this sense. I think this is a very innovative idea, but obviously, if we investigate on that, we probably find some flaws. So as far as I know, and in my personal opinion, there is no perfect compliance system right now. Every single compliance system has some flaws, in my opinion, at least. But like personally, I would obviously prefer the proactive methods instead of revealing like an amount or any transaction detail directly. I would rather give a proof that I'm illicit. I'm not, laundering money. But in real life, I'm sure that's not going to happen. I mean, almost all the enterprise-focused privacy protocols will use viewing key and decryption, unfortunately. But I do think this is the reality.
Really? Oh, that's disappointing to hear. I'm optimistic, but I do see your point. Like it kind of feels a little bit inevitable. But then on the other hand, you have like like Railgun is doing pretty well right now. You know, like people use Railgun, they haven't been sent to jail yet.
Yeah, I love Railgun.
Yeah.
But the thing is, Railgun's target audience is not enterprise.
So the enterprise audience is going to have different compliance requirements
For
when
sure,
they come in.
for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And do you guys have any opinions on, I guess, what the better compliance approach is for, I guess, like personal use or what enterprises will need?
Well, I think, well, ideally in the future, I see as like a system that, I mean, is so good that it's irrefutable. That that ideally is no longer up to authorities to decide what you can use, because that one is too good and too easy to use. But we've all seen what happens with Tornado Cash.
Yeah.
And so I think it's wise that we keep an eye on auditability. We keep an eye on making it at least feasible, at least doable, to reveal and to prove something.
Yeah.
That,
yeah.
I mean, to partially decrypt, whatever. Simply because otherwise it will be too hard to even build a blacklist of tainted addresses. Like, how do you even find out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess to me, like, I think we're not going to have a clear winner like in the future, right? My intuition says you're going to have like a family of techniques that work. And depending on the use case, you use one or the other, right? Like, if you want proactive things where you kind of like, prove your innocence and your use case can tolerate that, you use that, because I think like, that's the truly anonymous kind of like, setup. But, if you have to kind of like, reveal stuff, I think they're going to be kind of like, more, like they're going to be better solutions than what exists today and be used in the future.
And so in the future, do you think there's going to be a lot of different solutions that apply to you based on your requirements? Or do you think we're going to converge onto kind of one level of privacy, right? Because like de-anonymization kind of imposes some loss of privacy in a sense. So I had a question here, like, and you kind of brought it up for me, but in 5 years, are we going to converge to one shared standard, I guess, privacy level, or are we going to have a geographic differentiation where each different regulatory body requires a different privacy level?
I mean, probably the latter, based on, existing history, I guess, like, because I don't think you can create solutions that fit every possible kind of like, use case. But, I might be wrong, but my gut feeling says, we're going to have an SDK that kind of like defines a family of kind of like privacy levels, and you can, kind of like instantiate it to whatever is required for you to do.
I can just add that from a personal experience with that plausible deniability software, I can tell you firsthand that it's already the case that the privacy legislation is not uniform across legislation. Specifically because there are countries that do implement mandated decryption and countries that don't, and countries that don't care and just put you to jail. And so for sure, across different countries, you'll have people like legislation that care more about privacy and legislation that care less.
Yeah, definitely. Is there going to be any specific? We kind of talked a little bit earlier about some of the cryptography applications. Is there any specific cryptography technique, whether that be like TEEs, MPC, or ZK, that's kind of better suited for having this dynamic privacy system where you have different levels of privacy?
I have to kind of jump in and There isn't going to be, there's two ways that countries have approached this. One is proactive. I spoke with someone at a regulated German exchange, and I was telling him about the US and the type of work that we were doing with regulated financial institutions. And he told me it's oh, in America, you innovate. In Germany, we regulate. And he meant it as a compliment. He was bragging about it. And I was sitting there and I was just blinking. And I'm like, so you think you're going to tell me how I build privacy on chain and then I go out and build it? Good luck with that. I think I have difficulty explaining privacy solutions to the most technical audience in the world. Regulators are not going to get it right. They're going to be very reactive. And history has been kind of pretty unkind to people pushing the forefront of privacy technology, unfortunately. I don't see that necessarily changing, but what I do hope to see is that it becomes so ubiquitous and its adoption is so inevitable that regulators are forced to kind of readjust their definitions of what is acceptable in privacy, the same way that they've had to deal with TLS and HTTPS.
Yeah, and PGP.
Yeah, we're gonna look back in a couple of years and be like, damn, all of my transactions were public and I was using that in point of sales. That's silly. What was I thinking? I think that it's our job to actually make it so ubiquitous that you can't hold individuals accountable anymore. I think it's very dangerous to be the face and the image of a privacy solution. And conversely, I've been trying to sell this kind of integration service to regulated stablecoins and tokenization platforms. And they're not going to invest in the innovation. And they want me to tell them what to do. And also, when we're talking about compliance, they have no idea what compliance is. All the financial institutions that I've worked with to date have had completely different definitions of what KYC meant. And I couldn't build even a private, permissioned, completely siloed, sandboxed, completely guardrailed blockchain solution in which two financial institutions could agree on the definition of what KYC is. So we have so much left to do that we might just get lucky and public blockchains might implement privacy that becomes so ubiquitous that becomes the new gold standard that they have to adopt. And I think they'll just be forced into it just because if they don't, they'll miss it, just like they're forced into using blockchain today.
No, I definitely agree. I feel like we have to implement some privacy standards and have them kind of come to terms with that, if you will. Because if we just wait for regulation in the first place, it's going to be a lot of waiting. But you brought up an interesting point there, where you said public blockchains should implement privacy. I think you're alluding to implementing privacy at the base layer, right? I mean, that would be pretty great for everybody. But I guess why have we not yet integrated privacy on the base layer?
I mean, some people have. Solana tried, and they had to roll it. They had to roll it back,
really,
because there was a bug.
Oh,
yeah.
What was their
they
technique?
implemented shielded transfers at the protocol level, and they had an infinite minting bug in their ZK circuit, and they had to roll it back.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully it wasn't widely used, but that's why we don't implement it at the protocol level, because the way this goes bad is very bad.
And do you know anything about the nature of the bug? I guess was it a ZK issue or some mechanism?
That might be a better.
We see a lot of bugs. I don't remember, but probably from what I've heard, it's if it was a infinite mint, probably something missing then constraint. But I think there are also others that are operating right now, right? For example, Elia is a private L1, and they have their own kind of language, and they've been operating like that since the beginning. I think it's going to be harder to switch from a public to private. It's going to be easier for folks that are already private to stay private. But yeah.
Yeah, it's if it was to be implemented on like Ethereum at the actual protocol level, it really kind of changes like the trust assumptions and the assumptions that you make about the actual like Ethereum stack. I still want it to. I'm just saying that it has to become ubiquitous at the app layer first, before it gets enshrined, because there's just too many ways to approach the same problem. That it's almost impossible for like a protocol to just go all in, unless they built their stack from the beginning, right? So Elia is like a Zexi based like smart contract platform. It was privacy from the beginning, right? Same with Aztec, like it's privacy from the beginning. It's hard to add it after the fact without changing the assumptions.
Yeah, to be honest, I wouldn't make Ethereum like private by infra. I mean, I would protect Ethereum from the compliance risks, to be honest. And if anything gonna happen legally to any protocol, I wouldn't prefer that to be Ethereum itself because of the foundational structure and everything. And Ethereum is kind of central to the entire, let's say, EVM-based ecosystems. So, and there are many solutions out there that you can simply use those solutions to bring privacy into Ethereum or any EVM-based chain, regardless if L1 and L2. Because these days building a privacy protocol is really, really hard. Let's assume the 5 of us will build a privacy protocol and we're gonna generate a revenue out of it. For instance, let's say we wrote the contract, regardless if it's ZK-based or TE-based or FHE or MPC. But we're gonna make a revenue, right? Make a fee out of every transaction. Mm-hmm. And we have a compliance system, and that compliance system works after the deposit stage. Let's say there are several solutions doing that. And we're actually generating revenue from malicious accounts as well. And if we hold those revenue with the others in the same pool, it's actually a problem for regulators. So even this small thing is something we need to think a lot, and that's why I really think working on a privacy product is really, really difficult. You can go to jail. This is no joke, right? So that's why I wouldn't make Ethereum core L1 a part of it to protect itself.
Well, can't you still plausibly, realistically claim that you have no way of stopping the malicious funds flow?
Sorry, could you repeat?
Can't you, to defend yourself in court, can't you say that you don't really have a technical way of stopping the funds flow or preventing them, of receiving the malicious fee?
Yeah, but depends on the design choice, right? If and every account can get into the system, but let's say if it's the malicious account and cannot get out, this is an alternative compliance system. Okay, you're catching the malicious accounts, but you're still generating revenue out of malicious activity and illicit funds, and that's a regulatory problem. At least on a legal basis. That's my point. But obviously, you can build the compliance system so that any illicit funds cannot even enter the system. That's another option. But I'm sure there is another legal detail there as well. Because especially if you're cypherpunk or crypto native and building a crypto native product, privacy product, regulators and governments not gonna like us, so they will find something. And actually, that's why I'm quite pessimistic about the future of cypherpunk products. I would love them to survive, but to be honest, I don't think they will. If anything revolutionary changes the way of thinking.
What do you mean by a cypherpunk product that might not survive? For example,
Let's say there is a private product A and there's a private product B, and in the product A, the compliance is done on let's say proactively, and you simply the maximum thing you give to a regulatory party is the proof that you don't have any illicit funds. But in the setup B, when let's say MasterCard wants the details of any particular transaction, and you want MasterCard to implement your service, you probably need to give away the entire transaction with plain text amounts and senders and recipients. That's the main distinction. I mean, obviously, I would personally prefer to use the product A because it's literally private and also compliant, in my opinion. But that's the main point I'm a bit pessimistic about if enterprises think the same way that I do.
I want to jump in, and the way that I've actually been pitching this to enterprises is the fact that they're going to build something, and if it's cypherpunk enough, it's going to become illegal. So they should probably build on a tech stack in which they can upgrade and make the changes after the fact with relative ease, which is really kind of where ZKVMs shine. It allows for rapid prototyping. And we also have to say that corporations do not believe in cypherpunk ideals. Most of the wealthiest corporations have made money by accumulating and selling all of our data, which is kind of the exact opposite of what we stand for. So they're probably not in the market for privacy solutions for cypherpunk ideals. When I spoke with regulated financial institutions, they just want to hide their client info, so it's harder for their competitors to steal their customers. Like it's like cutthroat, brutal, and like hyper capitalistic. That's what they're in it for. If they do implement products on chain, it needs to be at least as privacy preserving as the current financial system. And that's kind of, we still have a big upgrade before we're even that private. So I think there's a large design space and we got a lot of work to do. But I would not wait for regulated corporations to be leading. They'll just like take a little bite of like the heavy research that we're doing. And hopefully they take a big enough bite that like the core fundamentals that we bring and our core ideals don't get diluted when it's actually implemented on mainnet.
Fantastic, everyone. I think we're out of time. Let's have a round of applause for our panelists.